Welcome to the Right Place podcast, where we learn with you how to build connections that matter, relationships that last, and businesses that thrive. My name is John Watson, and today I'm talking to Rudolf Rautenbach, my co-pilot here on the Right Place podcast. And we're talking about his new book, which is called Sustainable NPO Funding in South Africa, Making BBBEE Work for Your Cause. Rudolf, great to chat to you today.
Good, John. Thanks for having me. Normally, I would say I missed you and I hope we have a good chat today. But today it feels a little bit like an interview. So I must say, like all the other guests, thanks for having me.
No, it's good to chat about your book. This is your second book for those that are new to the channel. And I think it's going to be an interesting discussion today. Rudolf, let's dive straight in and talk about NPOs. Now, NPOs in South Africa, they do a lot of amazing work. But I think some of them are feeling the pressure as funding becomes scarcer, donor fatigue sets in, and the country is still facing challenges in spite of the recent elections and the government of national unity. Besides funding, what do you think are the 2 or 3 biggest challenges facing NPOs at the moment?
Interesting question, John. Funding is obviously the big one because everyone wants money, everyone needs money. But to answer your question more specifically, I would say the biggest risk or challenge is in the governance of an NPO. There are 248,000 registered NPOs with the Department of Social Development in South Africa. But if you move to the SARS side with regards to the exemptions, probably not half of those that have actually gone through the process of also applying for the tax exemptions, which is a stupid thing not to do. But also it gives you the sense that a lot of NPOs are not actually complying with the letter of the law. And that causes, again, that you struggle to find funding. Because if you don't have clean financials, you don't have a bit of a track record within governance, you're going to struggle to attract any resources, funding firstly, secondly, good people to work with you. And your cause will probably in the longer term die down. So definitely on the governance side, I think there's a massive gap in that people think I've registered this nonprofit company and now I'm above board and I can just carry on. But fact of the matter is that if you don't keep your books clean, you don't keep your governance in place intact, you're not going to make it in the longer term. And I would say probably half of those 248,000 are actually null and void, not functioning at the moment.
That's quite a shocking statistic there, Rudolf. Can you explain a little bit more in terms of the difference between an NPO, a non-profit organization, and a public benefit organization? Because I think sometimes people confuse the two.
Yeah, very good. There's a whole chapter in the book just by the way on that. But what happens is you register an entity first. Your entity could be a non-profit company, or a trust, or an association. So it doesn't matter which way you want to look at it. The way you form it is through one of those 3 angles. But then you need to go to the Department of Social Development and register a non-profit organization. So then you get an NPO number. And you find that quite a number of the NPOs that I work with do have that number. You're actually not a non-profit organization if you don't have that number. And it goes through social development. There's an online portal. You submit a host of documents and a constitution and things there. And then if they're happy with all of that, they issue that number. But you are not tax exempt. Even if you have a non-profit company at CIPC, you are not tax exempt if you do not register at SARS for the exemptions. You need to go and apply for the exemption. And it's in section 10 of the Tax Act. But if you get that, then obviously you are exempt from paying taxes. If not, you're actually liable for taxes, even though your registration number at CIPC says non-profit company. You have not completed that process with SARS. If you get the exemption with the PBO status, public benefit organization status at SARS, then you can issue Section 18A certificates that gives the donor the extra benefit of deducting that expense for tax purposes. So, 3 different things you have to do. First, your company registration. Secondly, non-profit organization at social development. And thirdly, with SARS for the PBO status. Only one of them forms the organization. The rest is just governance again.
No, that makes a lot of sense, Rudolf. I think a lot of new NPOs maybe think that this all happens automatically in the background and it's very easy. But I mean, there is some legwork and paperwork to do there. And also, I think some NPOs live in a dream world where they think they are the only NPO in South Africa. But like you said, there's 248,000 of them. So there's potentially 248,000 companies or NPOs asking big corporates for money, approaching them continuously. So if you want to stand out, the basics that you need to have in place is your admin, your governance, your structures, all your paperwork, all your registrations.
Yeah, you make a good point. If I can give an example without naming names, I'm currently working with one of the bigger universities in the country on a non-profit that they have. And we are still working with 2022 financial statements to just pull that through so that they can get to a place of good standing again to attract further donor funding. So the governance could let you down completely in the end. Yeah, two things. One is people don't know. So that's an awareness thing where you really thought, listen, I registered this non-profit company and I can go. But the second part is once you have everything in place, even if you knew, to keep it in place, to keep it above board, to keep it compliant, and to ensure that when you attract the right person, the right donor, that you're actually in a position to offer them perfect books, perfect records, things that would make sense to them. And I'm talking about finances a lot now, but fact is that these days, a lot of nonprofit funding moves firstly into education and secondly into environmental sustainable governance projects. So those are the two biggest ones. I've attended a function or a seminar earlier this year where they actually spoke about 79%, if I recall, of all NPO funding goes into those two pillars. There's 12 NPO pillars as they broke it down, different angles that people can take, food banks, whatever else. But education and environmental sustainable governance is the two ones that attract almost all the funding in the country. So you can't get that if you don't have your things in place.
No, excellent, Rudolf. I think that's solid advice to the NPOs. Get your stuff in order. Make it as easy as possible for corporates to invest in you. If there's any gaps or any gray areas or any uncertainty on you, it's going to be a red flag for the corporate. Now, Rudolf, looking at the BBBEE statutes and the frameworks, I think, am I correct in saying that a lot of NPOs don't know how to apply those to their offering to make them attractive for funders to invest in? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. So to give you a bit of a perspective, normally an NPO would go and say, listen, I want CSI funding, corporate social investment of corporate social responsibility funds. But in the BEE world, that funding with a bit of paperwork could also be socioeconomic development funds. So it's more or less the same thing. It's just the documentation that needs very specific information in it. I find that the bulk of nonprofits position themselves very well to get that SED funding. But what I found quite surprising over the years in BEE, where I've worked in the BEE world, is none of these nonprofits pivot into the rest of the BEE scorecard. So to give a few examples, if you are an early childhood development center, or you have a project where you get people to start looking after themselves, generate their own funding in terms of small business or entrepreneurship or so on, which is a charity still. You're doing it to equip the less advantaged. With the right packaging and a bit of formalization, whatever you are doing already as a project within the NPO could be packaged firstly for skills development, could be packaged for enterprise development, which are separate pillars on the BEE scorecard, but it also generates separate or additional ways of generating that funding. And the skills part especially is the most expensive part on a BEE scorecard. It costs the employers, the companies, the most money. If they are able to partner with you and contribute that funds or a portion of that funds to the nonprofit. Firstly, they're getting their points, and that is crucial for them. But secondly, they're making a big difference in an area where they potentially feel a passion, or they've got a love for the area or for the people or for the cause that you're supporting, and it makes them feel good. They might get some marketing spent out of that as well. So I, apart from management control, which is the people that work in your business, I can position any of the other 6 portions of the BEE scorecard within an NPO if you are already doing something similar. And it's literally aligning the rules of BEE, because the BEE is a scorecard. It keeps tab. It's a checklist almost. You need to do certain things to get the points. You need to pay to get the points. We can position those elements or those contracts and the paperwork and the accreditations maybe to allow you to give much more value than just, please give me a donation, we want to do X, Y, and Z. So I think that is the most exciting part of the book for me as well, is the NPO doesn't know that they're already doing it. It's already in place. Yes. It's already in their DNA. It's what they do. It's just a formalization. And here and there, it might be applying for accreditation, but we're already actually doing the hard work, and that is the execution.
No, that's a good point you make there. I think if the NPO is already busy with the stuff, and it is a requirement for the corporate, if you can match the two and ensure you've got your correct pillars in place, and then you make it easier for the corporate or the individual company that comes along to comply with their own BBBEE requirements and tick a few boxes on their side, I think that is a match that can maybe be sustainable, and you can get funding over the long term. And I think it's definitely important that if the NPO is seen as contributing to this, I mean, they can raise their visibility, they can raise additional funding because they are complying and they're solving a company's problem.
Yeah, it's exactly what I wanted to add on. The sustainability part, in my view, comes in because a donation is such a once-off affair. You don't get a donation commitment for 5 years. People donate and then they're gone. And the next year or the year after, you have to go back and almost beg them to partner with you again. Whereas on skills development, it runs over a course of time, and you're actually creating revenue over a longer term. Same for enterprise development and so on. So the sustainability part for me comes through in that you are able to continuously generate that money rather than just a once-off. I want to quickly add that on some of the sector scorecards, without going into technical details, things like agriculture, for instance, if a business is in the agriculture space, produce, or even the manufacturing of food falls under agriculture for BEE purposes, those businesses for skills development need to train unemployed youths, unemployed people. So it means that it's people that don't work for them. They need to be outside of their business. And that's why I see a massive gap for someone who works in a food bank, for instance, as a food gardens, these soup kitchens, those type of things, where you can get people to be educated through that process, maybe on an entrepreneurship course or an agriculture course for that matter. But you're also employing unemployed people from outside that sponsors the company's ambit. And thus they're getting the points for that specific portion. There's a lot more scorecards that have that requirement. I'm just using agri as an example.
No, that's a good example there, Rudolf. And I think it's quite applicable because especially like something like agriculture, I mean, it's all over South Africa. And an NPO aligning almost with that space and companies in that area, I mean, you can take care of your funding and you can make a contribution on the skills development side.
Yeah, for sure. And that's exactly what I want to promote, is that I don't like the once-off donations thing. I believe that the founder of an NPO, as soon as he wants to transition into something else, and that NPO normally almost closes down because the founder has this passion for what they want to do. And it gets everyone motivated and driven. But as soon as the founder that started the NPO moves on, I find that the NPOs almost stagnate and they thus don't add the same value anymore. And the next person might not have the same passion for that, or they just completely close down. So by doing these type of things, you can actually get to a point where the NPO almost starts looking after itself, because you don't have to go do fundraising. You're starting to compete over a wider spectrum, and that allows you to then generate income irrespective of the donations.
No, excellent, Rudolf. Thank you. Rudolf, in the book, you emphasize the importance of diversifying funding, and we've just been talking a little bit about that. What examples are there of successful strategies or alternative funding models that can work for NPOs?
Yeah, good. I think there's so many things, and the principle being, if you are able to think about the nonprofit company as a business that needs to almost generate its own funding, then in my view, you are on the right track, because then you can take things like, I've got an entrepreneurship drive, but we actually sell what we produce. We don't just give it away. We get the people who are part of the project and so on, the community where we operate in, to assist and to work there. And we reward them for that. But we need to generate funding out of the produce as well. There's a lady in KZN that actually does a very small community project in Howick. And they make handbags, leather ones with beads, very simplistic things, quite traditional as well, but very fancy, quite nice. And she brags about these things. They also make rugs, as an example, and they get some scraps almost from local businesses, leather and wires and things, and they've gone into this process. And if I'm not mistaken, there's about 15 people working within the NPO, and their only funding comes out of selling the produce, actually selling their handbags, selling those rugs. It's not it's not something where they just go and they make it and people take it home to keep them busy. So it's a revenue generating exercise, but with the aim to give people a skill. So that was their mandate. That's why they do this. But the sales of those produce or the product that they manufacture then generates an income from them. And to the extent that they now actually have a bit of a shop front in town where people can walk in. She always posts some photos and things, and a very nice way of thinking about how do you train, especially older women. That's part of a niche. Train them to do the things, to have a skill, to not just sit at home, but be actively involved in something that makes a difference, but also to generate cash.
That's a great example, Rudolf. And I like what you said there, run it like a business. And I think a lot of NPOs, it is a charity, but they run it like a charity. They give everything away for free, that they are overly generous. And then you run out of funding, or you paint yourself into a corner and you can't maneuver and you can't meet your commitments, and you kind of fall by the wayside a little bit. Talking about NPOs and running it like a business, I know at the Clara Business Network and the Right Place Centurion, we normally try and have an NPO slot where we want to raise some awareness for a certain NPO, and we give them the platform to promote themselves, talk about what they get up to. What have you seen NPOs do well that make effective connections at events like this and start building some relationships at networking events?
Yeah, interesting. I think the best example is probably with you in Nikki at Live Cape Town, or just the way she goes about it. And I think for me, the most important part here is to not just put up a banner and stand there in the corner hoping people would come to you. People are strange in that matter. And I think even myself, I would go if I'm interested in the cause and so on, but I'm not going to go there just because sometimes you walk there and then it feels like people are begging from you, and you don't want that. So what I find that works the best, and we hosted an event in June with a number of NPOs at the Irene event, and what we've done is, what happened is, those people actually go out and talk to the people like any other person would. They connect with them, they chat, and in the end, like, hey, if you want to get involved, do this or do that. I think one thing that almost gets people to run away is the ask for money. I would also go about building a relationship and getting people to commit some of their time. No one has enough time, myself included, and you as well. But we do feel like we made a massive impact if we spend some of our times supporting a cause that we believe in. And I think if you connect with as many people and get them involved rather than get them to just fund, that would actually build that relationship. Because as soon as I see how it works, the difference it makes and so on, I might just also add some funding, or I add some of my skill set. A simple example, a while ago, Ricardo Weingart, who's a non-profit lawyer here in Pretoria, he actually said that the lawyers have to do a certain amount of pro bono hours in a year. So if you've got a lawyer friend, team up with them and say, listen, instead of doing it for a criminal to get him off, potentially spend those pro bono hours assisting us to set up contracts, to formalize our legal structures, to actually be on our board, maybe, to spend those hours listening to what's happening in our place. And I think the more diverse your network is, the better for the NPO as well, because you need people that know finance, you need people that know the legal sides, you actually need people that can market and do sales. And if they're part of your network, you can leverage that to assist. And to me, don't just stand there and ask for funding. Tell them about the cause. Get them to be involved. Come and spend a day there or half a day on a Saturday. I have an open day where people can come and see what it's about and connect with a person's emotion. And then as soon as he actually buys into that concept, a lot of other things will flow out of it.
No, I agree with you 100%. If you play your cards right, funding should be the least of your worries. You should be building connections and get people to contribute hours and their skills to help build the NPO almost from the inside out, that you've got everything in place. And also, if you just ask for money and I say no, and that's the end of the conversation, then it's like, oh, dude, I mean, I know people that maybe want to invest in your NPO, but if you build a relationship with me, say, hey, John, can you look at our financial statements, or can you come to our event or something like that? And we've got a bit of a relationship going. Then you've got access to my network, and maybe the funding comes a little bit further down the line. But at least we've got a working relationship, and I don't mind helping out, and I try and add value where I can. And then the funding will come through different avenues a little bit later down the line.
Oh, for sure. As you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, those open days are actually the best thing. But I'm wondering if people would think, listen, I have to now start an NPO. And I think from my point of view, we have so many NPOs already. There might be a very specific cause that you want to start up because of your involvement somewhere, and I get that. But I think there's more value to be added by joining forces with an existing nonprofit than to just start off on a completely new one again. I would rather expand on their reach. If you take Live Cape Town, for instance, maybe one day it becomes a Live Hout Bay because of that area there as well. So rather expand what is already in place, but to go and start a completely new thing, you're just duplicating effort. And I would go as far as to connect with that existing nonprofit, I don't want to say owner, driver, the person that runs it at these type of events. Go and connect with them, tell them what your vision is, and if it matches what you do, potentially a better opportunity to completely partner with them and to assist and to build on that than to go out and just duplicate efforts, start your own thing again.
No, absolutely. And also, I mean, if you think about it, if an NPO that's already up and running, They've maybe done all their registrations, got most of their paperwork in line. They've made a couple of mistakes. They've figured things out. If you're going to start fresh, you have to start from square one. You have to go through all those pains, all those ups and downs, all those waiting for the registrations. Instead of you can jump on board an already existing NPO and just help them out a bit and accelerate their growth because you bring in your skill set, your network, into the building there. So I think that's really great advice. We don't need more NPOs. I think more NPOs is not the solution. If NPOs are working better and functioning better and taking advantage of the triple BE pillars that you mentioned earlier, then we're going to change the landscape of South Africa.
Yeah, man, if you take the Gift of the Givers organization, it's actually now an international organization. It's much bigger than South Africa. They can pull in resources from anywhere in the country already. And it's firstly due to network, but also they've established themselves in a way that they can actually leverage on the relationships that they've done. They do good work. They're already compliant with all the laws and regulations. And they're not controversial. They actually do what they say they're going to do. And if you look at the floods in KZN and those type of things that happened, within hours, they are there. They're already operational. They run the show almost. They're almost doing the work that government should be doing. And I would rather see how I can either partner, do a branch with them, or just support in some way with time and effort than to try and do exactly what they do. Because if you think with the next floods, you're going to make a massive difference, before you get there, they're going to be there. They're definitely going to be on the ground and active already. And it's not to discourage anyone. I'm just thinking the pooling of resources in this regard, with this market already being so saturated, doesn't really call for additional NPOs. It calls for more effective nonprofits. And that, I think, is where anyone can add value.
No, excellent, Rudolf. I agree with you there. Rudolf, we almost come to the end of our talk this morning. Let's try and end on a high and talk about the positives of NPOs in South Africa. Where do you think there are good opportunities for some NPOs to branch out into? And also, where do you see the NPO landscape changing in the next couple of years?
Good. I think the more successful projects are the ones where we actually support or implement where government has unfortunately failed, or where government's not putting enough resources on the ground. And those ones are actually bridging this massive gap. I personally have a massive love or affinity for education at a younger age. I think the early childhood development part, your early primary school side is really where we're going to make a difference in the longer term in South Africa, where education is failing us to an extent. And if we can get, especially the masses, educated well from a younger age, when they need that ability to learn and not just sit at home waiting for mom and dad to come back, I think that is to me where we need to focus. There's a lot of other courses that obviously can make the difference, but I believe that is where we're having the biggest impact. Not to disregard any of the others, but I just think that is the one that in the longer term will stand us in good stead. And then in terms of your question of the changes in this landscape, I think it's going to be a much bigger clampdown on non-compliance. I think there's a bit of a toothlessness from the government at the moment, and we just accept it. But what I'm seeing from the SARS angle is that they quite strict nowadays in terms of compliance on that. So definitely a lot of these nonprofits that will find it a lot more hard to continue doing what they're doing if the compliance is not up to speed. And then, as I said earlier on, the shift of funding and projects towards environmental sustainability as well as education is a definite. It's already in place, but I think it's definitely going to improve. It's going to increase in the future. And I would not go almost disregard international funding. There's a massive international funding projects that are available if we position ourselves right. And I see this increasing in the future because there's this focus on Africa. That's obviously a big place, but I think that charitable side of the international community might just give us what we need, apart from BE, apart from our own fundraising opportunities. And I think that's definitely something that we need to look at.
I like what you said there about the international community. I mean, there are some really, really big foundations, some of them we know about, that are donating to government organizations as well, government public entities, but also some rather large NPOs. And I think that is because those NPOs are doing a great job. They've got their structures in place. And also maybe those NPOs have networked correctly. They've connected with the right people. If you're just going to sit at home in your NPO building and complain, you're not going to get anywhere. You need to put yourself out there. There are definitely opportunities. And also, if you've got a scarcity mindset, funding is not going to come your way. There is more than enough wealth and capital out there to support NPOs, but you need to get your ducks in a row. And I think the challenge that we want to put out there to the NPOs is get your admin right. Get your admin right. That's the bare minimum. If your structures are right, your admin is right, and you're making it as easy as possible for companies to invest in you, to contribute, and to contribute on a sustainable basis, not just a once-off donation, then I think you can grow your NPO sustainably.
I want to come back to a point I made earlier on, is put those things in place, but also ensure that you run that non-profit like a business. You must almost run it like a profit-making business, because it shows the sustainability. It's not an in and out flow the whole time. And if you can do that right over a prolonged period of time, the funding opportunities internationally, but also locally, becomes a lot more evident. And I think the mistake we make is that we always go and stand to beg. But if we can prove to them that this project is an ongoing project, it will continue in future because of these things that we've put in place, then I think that funding will also be unlocked a lot easier.
I agree, Rudolf. Thanks so much, Rudolf. It's been quite a fascinating discussion. Rudolf, your book is called Sustainable NPO Funding in South Africa. Where can people get their own copy?
Thanks. It's on Amazon, so amazon.co.za. If you search for the name, you'll find it there. It's at a very decent price. It's not a money-making book. I think it's just the information and the value that I think people can get out of it. But yeah, mostly Amazon in hard copy. There's also an ebook one that people can do through Kindle, also through Amazon. But the hard copy is on the amazon.co.za platform. And then, if they come into contact with me, I can obviously send them a copy directly as well. But Amazon is the preferred option.
Okay, excellent, Rudolf. No, thanks so much. We'll put those links in the description below and obviously on LinkedIn as well. Rudolf, thanks so much for your time. I really enjoyed talking to you today.
Good. Thanks, John. And thanks also for your support, as well as the work that you're doing with Live Cape Town. I've mentioned them a few times, and I think the success there, every time I see a post or some information about it, I'm astounded by how quickly and how high quality it is. I mean, it's very smart. It looks so professional, and especially within an area where nothing else does. So I think the value add there is that people would want to be part of it, and that to me is exactly where you want to be. So well done to you guys and Rob and Nikki as well, driving that process on Live Cape Town.
Thanks so much, Rudolf. Thanks for your time. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening, and we'll see you next time at the right place.